Hey guys, welcome back. This is Review with Jade, and today we are gonna do a recap of season 1 of the famous Netflix series Dark, before the release of its next and final season, the 27th of June. We start by saying that all of the series is taking place in this fictional small town in Germany, Winden. The four families involved in all of the craziness of this small town are Tiedemann, Nielsen, Kahnwald, and Doppler. Season 1, Episode 1 starts really strong. This man hangs himself in his house the 21st of June 2019. We later find out in the episode that he was actually Michael Kahnwald, father of Jonas Kahnwald, one of the main characters of the series. Before he commits suicide though, he leaves a letter to his son, writing on the top not to open it before the 4th of November 2019 at 10:13 p.m. In the next scene, we actually know that Hannah Kahnwald, so Jonas' mom, is having an affair with Ulrich Nielsen. After months of therapy, Jonas goes back to school with his best friend Bartosz Tiedemann, but he actually finds out that his love interest, Martha Nielsen, is dating his best friend. Martha Nielsen is the sister of Mikkel Nielsen and Magnus Nielsen, who are the kids of Ulrich Nielsen, so the cheater, and Katarina Nielsen, who's actually the principal of the school of his kids. Meanwhile, Eric Obendorf is been missing for several days, and the police is looking for him. Police chief Charlotte Doppler and Ulrich Nielsen, a police officer, are on the case. Later on in the episode, we get to know that Hannah Kahnwald is actually the massage therapist of this guy, Alexander Tiedemann, who's the husband of Regina Tiedemann, who owns an hotel in Winden. They are the parents of Bartosz Tiedemann, Jonas' best friend. While in school, the principal, Katarina Nielsen, and the parents are discussing about the missing kid situation. This guy shows up, Helge Doppler, who's the father of Peter Doppler, who's the husband of Charlotte Doppler. Helge escaped the mental hospital only to go to the school and say that something is gonna happen again. Meanwhile, Jonas, Bartosz, and the three Nielsen siblings are going to explore the huge forest of Winden. At some point, they find this dark and scary cave, and some noises are coming from it. So they start to run away, but while they run away, they lose Mikkel Nielsen. The kid is missing for hours now, and the family is worried. The police is looking for him, so we have two missing kids now. Close to the end of the episode, Ulrich Nielsen finds a dead body in the wood. The dead body is of a kid, but is not of his sons. The very last scene shows us that Eric Obendorf, the first missing kid, is actually kept in this strange room, tied up on a chair by a hooded man. Episode 2 opens up with this stranger holding a strange suitcase. Later on in the episode, he actually checks in Regina's hotel. While the investigation are going, we find out that Franziska Doppler and Magnus Nielsen have a relationship. Meanwhile, Tronte Nielsen is going to the crime scene suspiciously. Tronte Nielsen and his wife Jana are the parents of Ulrich Nielsen and Mats Nielsen. Mats Nielsen disappeared exactly 33 years earlier, and they never found the body. Alexander Tiedemann, director of the nuclear power plant, is denying the access to Ulrich to go and research in the nuclear power plant because he's hiding something that we are gonna find out later on in the episodes. At some point, everywhere in the city, the lights are blinking and some dead birds are falling from the sky. Finally, at the end of the episode, we see our guy, Mikkel, who's exiting the cave, but something seems not right. He's going to the direction of his home, but when he knocks at the door, this guy opens up, and he actually says that that's his home. After that, close to the doormat, we actually see a journal dated 5 November 1986. Time travel! Episode 3. In 1986, Jana Nielsen, who sees Mikkel entering her door, asks him if he has seen his son who's been missing from several days. After that, we see a younger Charlotte from 1986 who's picking up a dead bird from the ground. As well, in 1986, police officer Egon Tiedemann is working on the case of the missing Mats Nielsen and is also investigating of the strange deaths of these ships. Claudia Tiedemann, Egon's daughter, is taking her daughter Regina Tiedemann to school. When we get to the school, we also see young Anna Kahnwald and young Katarina Nielsen. So at this point, we know that Mikkel, at the end of the episode 2, he actually met his younger father, Ulrik Nielsen. We find out that Claudia Tiedemann is working in the nuclear power plant as she had an affair with Tronte Nielsen. After that, Mikkel goes to the police station and he meets police officer Egon Tiedemann, and he says that he's looking for his father, Ulrik Nielsen. At that point, Egon Tiedemann believes that is one of Ulrik's prank, and he goes to his house to confront him. Mikkel then meets the nurse Ines, who's gonna take care of him from now on. In the next scene, we see Bernd Doppler, who's Helge's father and Peter's grandfather, passing the leading charge to Claudia Tiedemann of the nuclear power plant and its big secret. A ton of barrels of nuclear waste hidden under the power plant. After that, another rain of dead animals are falling from the sky, while Egon Tiedemann is looking for answers in the woods. Mikkel is re-entering the cave in order to go back to his time 2019, and in the meantime, Ulrik Nielsen is trying to get to his son and go to the cave as well in 2019, but they cannot find each other. In the very last scene of episode 3, we see a mysterious man building a mysterious machine. Back to 2019, we see the stranger in his hotel room who has a journal of 1986. He definitely knows something. After that, we are introduced to Charlotte's younger deaf daughter, Elizabeth, who's having fun stealing her sister Franziska a red lipstick. Charlotte Doppler, previously suspicious of her husband, is stealing a footage from the main street, and after leaving her daughter Elizabeth to school, she goes to the morgue where some birds are tested because they were falling from the sky. She then realizes that it's all connected of the events of 33 years earlier. She goes to the police station and she meets with her colleague Torben Waller. Torben Waller tells her that the dead body of the kid is actually been moved, and in his clothes there's some red sand. Thanks to the stolen footage, Charlotte finds out about the relationship of her husband with Benny. And after that, before going home, she stops in the woods and she sees a strange basement, who's actually appearing in few different scenes. Neither Charlotte nor Peter remember to pick up Elizabeth at school, and she's going missing, luckily for only few hours. Who's in trouble though is Elizabeth's deaf friend, Yasin, who's been found in the forest by the same hooded man who's been torturing Eric. Episode 5 starts with Charlotte Doppler telling her daughter about her missing friend, Yasin. After that, she confronts her husband, Peter, who clearly cheated on her a year before with Benny. But Benny also told her that Peter wasn't going with him for at least 1 year, so he must have been somewhere else. And since in the woods she has found some red sand, she connected his husband to the missing kids. We see that the stranger is giving a package to Regina to be delivered to Jonas Kahnwald. In 1986, Mikkel is evolving his relationship with the nurse Ines, and at some point, a mysterious priest shows up and he starts to talk to him. Back to 2019, Ulrik breaks up with his lover Anna, telling her that she needs to focus on the research of his son. After that, the stranger and Jonas finally meet, and the stranger tells to Jonas that he actually knew his father. In 1986, young Anna is actually finding out about the first sexual encounter of Ulrik Nielsen and his future wife Katarina. She goes to the police, and because of her jealousy, she tells to Egon Tiedemann that Ulrik has been raping Katarina. Meanwhile, in 2019, Martha Nielsen and Jonas Kanwald have a face-to-face conversation and they end up kissing. In 2019, the same mysterious priest that talked to Mikkel in 1986 shows up to Bartosz and he offers him a deal. Later on, Charlotte told to her daughter Elizabeth and she finds out that she met exactly the same guy whose name is finally revealed, Noah. As well, in 2019, Jonas finally finds the package delivered to him with the letter of his father revealing the truth. Mikkel Nielsen has went back on time and he grown up becoming his father, Michael Kanwald. So at that point, Jonas realized that he actually kissed his aunt and her mom was boning both Ulrik and his son Mikkel. Wow! Episode 6 in 2019 starts with Regina having nightmares about his childhood when he was tied up on a tree as a prank by Katarina and Ulrik Nielsen. Later on in the episode, she actually called her doctor as she finds out that she has breast cancer. Meanwhile, Ulrik Nielsen finds his mother's deposition at the time that his brother disappeared, and he finds out that his mom lied about his father being at home, while he was probably with his lover Claudia Tiedemann. After that, we see that Katarina finds out about Ulrik's affair with Anna by tracking her phone calls. After that, Ulrik goes to Regina to have some more information about Mats, his brother, because he knows that Regina was the last person who sees him before he disappeared 33 years earlier. At the end of the conversation, Ulrik finds out that Regina wasn't the one who talked to the police 33 years earlier about his sexual encounter with Katarina. It was actually Anna. Ulrik is pissed and he goes to Anna and tells her to stay away from him and from his family. Few scenes later, we see that Jonas enter again the cave and he actually finds a door at the end of it. This door has a writing on the front saying Sic mundus creatus est, which means this is the world created. When Jonas finally opens the door, the lights in the cities are blinking again, and in the meantime we see Peter Doppler with Tronte Nielsen. They are in the basement that Charlotte discovered the episode before, who have a notebook with some dates and times, and they seem to know what's going to happen in the future. Jonas is now in 1986, and while he was walking under the rain, he actually meets his younger mother, Anna. The episode ends with Ulrik going to the morgue, comparing an old picture of himself and his brother Mads with the dead body of the kid. They seem to be the same person. Episode 7 opened up in 2019 with old Helge having nightmares about his childhood. We find out that he is actually being tortured in the same room of the other kids. In 1986, Egon Tiedemann goes to Helge to investigate about Mads, and he finds out that the day that Mads disappeared, Helge took a way too long way to go home. Suspect. In the meantime, in 2019, Charlotte is investigating in the nuclear power plant, thanks to a warrant, and she finds out some remaining pieces of the barrels with nuclear scores. Jonas goes to Mikkel and he tries to take him back to 2019, but at some point the stranger stops him and tells him that if Mikkel goes back, Jonas will never born. Ulrik investigates about Mads' case and then he finds out that somehow Helge is involved. He go to the mental hospital and he try to get answer, but he fails. After that, we see that Helge in 1986 entered the same basement in the wood. In 2019, Charlotte got to the same basement and she finds out this piece of wallpaper. They actually can show us that the basement and the room that the kids were tortured are exactly the same place. We see that Jonas come back to 2019, and meanwhile Ulrich follows the old Helge through the cave. A parallel from 1986 shows us that Helge is taking Mads' dead body off the basement, so is somehow involved in his murder. In the last scene of the episode, we see that Noah is in the basement and is writing in the wall 9 November 1953. What? Episode 8 open up with Egon Tiedemann in 1953, already a police officer, investigating of 2 dead bodies. These 2 dead bodies are belonging to the kids missing in 2019. Wow! After that, we see that the stranger is talking to the mysterious man who is building this strange machine. We later find out there is a time travel machine. Few scenes later, Ulrich finally finds out the door with Sic Mundus Creatus Est, and he goes through it. Still in 1953, young Helge go back home to his parents, Bernd Doppler and Greta Doppler, and he tell them that the police is investigating about 2 dead bodies of kids. After that, we see that Helge is playing alone in that famous basement. On the other side of the cave, Ulrich casually meets his father, Tronte, and his grandmother, Agnes, but he realizes it's actually in 1953. Meanwhile, in 1986, the stranger has entered the shop of the clockmaker, who's also the author of a book about time travel, loopholes, and this kind of stuff. In 1953, Ulrich entered the same shop with the exact same man and gave him the book he wrote, or that he will write. As well, in 1953, young Claudia Tiedemann is playing with her dog Gretchen, who's gonna be missing later on. She begins to study with young Helge, and at some point, these 2 strangers show up. Tiedemann's family rent the room to Tronte and Agnes Nielsen. At some point, young Ines and young Jana, who are friends, are entering the shop of the clockmaker, asking for a watch, and Ulrich immediately recognizes his mom. After that, the 2 girls are talking about the 2 dead bodies found by the police, and Ulrich starts to connect the dots. He immediately ran away from the shop, leaving his jacket behind. He goes to young Helge and he tries to murder him. Few minutes later, he moves his body in the basement, believing that he's dead. In 1986, the stranger asks the clockmaker to repair his time machine, the same time machine that actually the clockmaker himself built somewhere in the timeline. I'm confused. Back to 1953, we see that the clockmaker is finding the phone of Ulrich, and he's gonna use it to activate the time machine. Episode 9 starts in 1953 with the chief of the police, Daniel Kahnwald, father of Ines, asking to his police officer, Egon Tiedemann, to investigate the disappearance of Helge. After that, we discover that Agnes Nielsen and Doris Tiedemann start to have an affair. Egon Tiedemann finds Ulrich covered in blood and he arrests him. Back to 1986, we see a younger Alexander Kohler, or Alexander Tiedemann, alas, that is running in the woods, being shot and with a gun in his hand. At some point, he met Regina, who is being bullied by Yurik and Katarina, and Alexander immediately defends her by pointing the gun to the kids. We also see a brief scene of Claudia Tiedemann inside the hidden place of the nuclear power plant, and at some point, her missing dog from 1953 is appearing again. Hey dog! In 1986, Alexander Kohler, alias Boris Newald, buries his belongings, so his gun and his passport, in the wood. But young Anna, the little actually spying on him, and later on he takes his belongings. Later on, Alexander goes to Regina's mom, Claudia Tiedemann, and asks her if she can offer him any kind of job. Meanwhile, we see adult Helge with Noah, who are trying to fix the torturing machine. But we see that actually Helge is struggling with the situation. In 2019, Katarina Nielsen noticed that Yurik is been missing for a while. So first she goes to Charlotte, thinking that he's at work, and then she goes to Anna, thinking that maybe he's with her lover, but she cannot find it anywhere. Meanwhile, old Claudia Tiedemann, who clearly knows about time travel, goes to meet Bartosz, his grandson. At the same time, Anna Kahnwald goes to Alexander and blackmails him with his old belongings. He tells him to destroy Yurik's life. After that, Alexander calls his friend Waller. Plot twist. And we find out they are both involved on the removal of the barrels in the nuclear power plant. In 1986, Claudia Tiedemann asks Alexander to work for her, but he cannot tell anyone what they are doing. Alexander sealing the hidden place of the power plant with a strong and tough door. Meanwhile, in 2019, the stranger finds the missing barrels. At the end of the episode, old Claudia Tiedemann goes to the clockmaker and gives him the instruction to build a time machine. Another paradox. The final episode of season 1, episode 10, starts with Peter Doppler seeing a wormhole in the basement. From that wormhole, it comes a dead body of a kid. After that, Peter tries to identify the kid and he finds his ID. It's actually Mats Nielsen from 1986. So he immediately calls Tronte Nielsen his father. After a few minutes, old Claudia shows up and he explains to the guys what's going on, and he gives them the notebook. After that, Claudia suggests to move the body somewhere else. So Charlotte was actually right about his husband being involved on moving the body of Mats, but he's not actually the killer. Few scenes later, we see Ines giving Jonas the old letter of his father, and she confesses to him that she actually knew the truth. Meanwhile, in 1953, Yurik Nielsen has been arrested for the attempted murder of Helge Doppler, even though he's still alive. Meanwhile, in 2019, Bartosz has found the truth about Marta and Jonas kissing. So Jonas and Bartosz went for a fight and they go in separate ways at the end of it. The clockmaker in 2019 now has two different time machines. The one who built after in 1986, Claudia brought him the instruction, and the other one brought him from Jonas. So in that moment, the clockmaker shows to the stranger that the phone of Yurik can activate the time machine. Meanwhile, if you remember, old Helge went to the cave and he went to 1986 in order to stop himself to do what Noah's has been asking for so long. Meanwhile, in 2019, Tronte Nielsen and Peter Doppler are inside the basement waiting for the apocalypse. When Jonas travels back to 1986, he finds a young Charlotte drawing a dead bird. Meanwhile, a parallel in 2019 shows us that Charlotte actually found out the truth about where Ulrich is. He go to an old case and he see a picture of the man accused of young Helge's attempting murder, Ulrich. Jonas is going to Mikkel's room in the hospital, but he actually being stopped by the stranger. After few time, we see that Jonas waking up in the basement. The stranger has locked him up in the basement, and at the end he reveals the truth. The stranger is actually Jonas himself from the future. Meanwhile, in 1986, old Helge is trying to kill his younger version by hitting him with the car, but he actually end up dying himself. The stranger, alias adult Jonas, is now activating the time machine, and a huge dome is appearing, covering the whole city, while Alexander Tiedemann and Regina Tiedemann are watching. Few moments later, young Helge from 1953 and young Jonas from 2019 are locked up in the same basement but in different time. At some point, a wormhole starts to grow up and they see each other. They are actually shocked and they try to touch with their fingers. When the fingers finally touched, they switch places. Helge end up to the same basement of Jonas, so probably 2019, and Jonas end up to a different basement, different timeline. When he exits the basement, he finds himself surrounded by strangers. He's in 2052. Oh my god!